I haven't done this before, but I've got to tell you that tonight I was in bed just about midnight on October 4th, 2024, and couldn't fall back to sleep until I told you this story about a Jewish Israeli friend of mine who formerly served in the Israeli Defense Force. And we had an unusual experience 10 years ago, and just tonight it got updated in another way. But I know you don't know who I am, so let me give you about 30 seconds. I'm Bruce Porter, past pastor of First Baptist Church of Salem, Oregon, founder of the Island Community Church in the Florida Keys for about 20 years, graduate of Florida Bible College, Dallas Theological Seminary, started Dayspring Fellowship in Kaiser, Oregon, and then, sadly, fell into sin, was divorced from my wife, went through 3 marriages, started a securities firm, became an instrument-rated pilot, was single for many years, and through an unusual series of events, ended up in Brazil, where I met a nominal Catholic Brazilian cattle rancher lady who God used to bring the word of the Lord to me a second time. I guess I'm like Jonah 2.0. I got convicted of sin, came back to the Lord. She came to the States with me, got married, was baptized with snow falling in the Willamette River, and I'm now living in the Portland, Oregon area. I'm here in my man cave tonight in the middle of the night, October 4th, 2024, because I want to tell you a story about my friend. We're going to call him Bart. He'll probably end up seeing this, so he can correct anything that's wrong about my memory. But about 10 years ago, I was sitting under a gazebo outside in Southern California with a fire blazing in a fireplace, and one of my 4 sons and his Israeli Jewish businessman friend was sitting there with him, trying to diminish the supply of brewskis available in the world. In the course of that evening, my friend Bart, we'll call him, said to me, I had some strange words come into my mind that I had never heard before. Now, I don't know if this was during a dream at night, sleeping, or whether this was an apparition during the daytime. I'm just not into those kind of things, to be honest with you. So I was listening to him, knowing that there's some beer flowing. But he said, I looked up these words that came into my mind on Google and found out these words were out of the Bible book of Revelation. Now, I doubt if my friend Bart had ever opened the New Testament. I doubt if he'd ever read the book of Revelation. So I was a little bit surprised for this turn in the conversation. And so we pursued it a little bit, but I think it was the next day. We were sitting outside in front of some of his rental properties, and we started talking about the prophecies about Jesus the Messiah from his Hebrew scriptures. Now, I think that I can best summarize Bart's spirituality by calling him an atheist, but I'm suspecting he would probably rather call himself a secularist, because in Israel there are religious people and there's secular people, and I think he'd prefer to be called a secular person. But as far as I know, I don't think that Bart has any kind of belief in a God. He served in the Israeli Defense Forces years ago, came to the United States, was an entrepreneur, built several different kinds of businesses, successful guy, good-looking guy, has a beautiful wife, a wonderful dog, nice guy. I really like this guy, great guy. So we're sitting there outside his rental properties, and the discussion went to whether or not Jesus was the Messiah predicted in the Old Testament. So I started with Micah chapter 5, verse 2. The Jewish prophet Micah wrote, I guess, about 700 BC. And it said the everlasting one was going to come out of Bethlehem, Ephratah. There were 2 Bethlehems, and it so happens the Bethlehem it mentioned was the one that Jesus was born in about 700 years later. Remember the song, O Little Town of Bethlehem? Well, that's in the Old Testament, about 700 years earlier, the prediction of his birthplace. And then we looked at Psalms 22, where King David wrote in about 1000 BC, It said the Messiah was going to have his hands and his feet pierced. This was hundreds of years before crucifixion was ever invented or developed. His hands and his feet were going to be pierced. Isaiah 52 and 53, the great prophet Isaiah, the scroll I looked at, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Museum of the Book in Jerusalem, about 26 feet long, preserved from probably 200 years before Christ. The book of Isaiah chapter 52 tells us that he was going to be despised and rejected of men. But all of us are like sheep. We've gone astray. But the Lord has laid on him, the Messiah, the iniquity, the sin of us all. So we looked at those verses, and each time I would show Bart one of these verses, he would take out his Hebrew scriptures. Even though he's secular, he speaks Hebrew. And he would read it in Hebrew, and he'd say, yeah, that's what it says. But Bart didn't make any decision. And over the years, I've sent some scriptures to him and some messages from my pastor, Brett Mater, at the Athey Creek Christian Fellowship in West Linn, Oregon, especially when he has his prophecy update the first Friday of every month. Things that had to do with Israel and prophecy I'd sent to him. And by the way, I was also pastor of Dayspring Fellowship in Kaiser, Oregon, and after I came back to the Lord many years later, was the COVID pastor of a little church called Woodland Park Baptist Church in a lower income area of Portland. That was for about 18 months. So anyway, my background is as a pastor, and I taught Bible at the Florida Bible College ages ago in Hollywood, Florida. Tonight, I looked at my phone and I had a text message from Bart. We communicate every so often, and usually it goes in spurts. We'll text back and forth for several days, and then we won't say anything for several months. But these last 2 weeks have been really interesting in Israel, because a year ago, on October 7th, 2023, Hamas attacked Israel and massacred many people, took other hostages. That's been going on almost for a year now. And about a week ago, the kingpin of Hezbollah was bombed to death in Beirut, Lebanon, after many of his underlings were assassinated, apparently by Israel, in days and weeks before that. So tonight, out of the blue, I get a text message from Bart. And the text message basically doesn't say anything, except it's a video of biblical prophecy from two guys that are talking about Israel and prophecies in Scripture. And it's especially interesting because of what's happening right now as we wait for Israel potentially to take retaliation on Iran for the largest ballistic missile strike in history. Just a few days ago, they sent 181 ballistic missiles from Iran to Israel, where almost all of them were disposed of without causing great injury for the most part. And that followed the April 13th or 14th missile attack earlier this year. So these things, I think, have brought Bart's attention to Israel and Iran. And for some reason, he had seen this biblical teaching, 24 minutes long. I think it was from Eric Stakelback and another friend. They were doing a Bible prophecy teaching. And Stakelback had just gotten 1 million followers on his YouTube channel. And so, without comment, my friend Bart sent this to me. So I texted him back and I said, I have believed this for 60 years. What do you think of it? And he texted me back and said, I'm not sure if I believe this or not, but it sounds like we're at the gates of something that is really dangerous. And he went on to say in another text, this is something that we ought to be praying about. And then he said, believers and non-believers. And I think probably the non-believers part Bart was talking about himself. And here, somebody that I would consider an atheist said we should be praying. So who do atheists pray to? I don't know that I know the answer to that. But I said back to him, since he's a secularist or an atheist, I said, after he told me that believers and non-believers should be praying during this dangerous time, I said, you are a lousy secularist, meaning you're a lousy atheist. And he sent back several smiling faces. And then I said to Bart, I'm going to pray that you will follow Abraham. Or it says in Scripture, the Old Testament Torah, Genesis 15:6, Abraham believed in the Lord, and the Lord counted it to him for righteousness. So I was awakened out of my sleep tonight at midnight, and I think the reason might be this. I'm going to call on my friends, my brothers and sisters in Jesus' family, to pray for my friend Bart, because 10 years ago, somehow, verses from Revelation got planted in his spirit with no explanation on my part. I have no idea why that happened. And tonight, he sends me a video, 24 minutes long, of Bible prophecy involving Iran, Israel, Russia, Turkey, etc. I'm going to ask you, maybe just for a minute, or whenever you think up, or when the Spirit reminds you, would you pray for my friend Bart? I like this guy. He's a great guy. If you met him, you'd like him too. I want him to be part of Messiah's kingdom. So that's all I had to say tonight. Pray for Bart. Thank you for joining me tonight. Midnight in the Man Cave.